Hi there, I'm Davio, your favorite podcast host. I'm here with Lieven Scheire. I think for the first time I'm a little bit nervous because I think it's the first time I have someone who's more used to this than I am. So Lieven is, I would say he made it into an art to make scientific and difficult concepts understandable for everyone, basically. So here we're here with Lieven. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. A wonderful day in Belgium. Spring is coming through.
True. Wonderful day, but I had a horrible traffic this morning. So for some reason, the sun. Normally, it's the rain that makes people anxious, but today it was the sun. You've been doing this now for how long? And this is
Science communication?
Yeah.
Let's see. I started doing pure comedy, and then the science communication part 17 years ago, I think. Yeah, in the late night show.
You call yourself a nerd, if I may say?
Absolutely, reclaiming the N-word.
But at the same time, you're a nerd that everyone likes.
Probably, yes, but I'm not alone in this. I think the revenge of the nerds was a slow revolution, and I think many people who would be considered nerds 20, 30 years ago are now accepted. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but. That's true, but at the same time, you also succeeded at bringing topics that are more geeky or just more technologically difficult or scientific into the open world. Mm-hmm. How did you come about? Like, you started in comedy, but then now you're talking about DNA and AI and all of that stuff.
So I studied physics, mm-hmm. and at the same time, I started practicing stand-up comedy. Which is a wonderful combination. When you're a student, you have all the freedom and you don't have a job yet. And so mm-hmm. every weekend I was playing stand-up comedy in small bars and youth clubs in Flanders. And at the same time, I was studying physics. And this stand-up comedy part gives you kind of antennas of what do people like, what do they not mm-hmm. like. Stand-up comedy is a lot of fun to do. And it's also a very honest genre. Mm-hmm. If they don't laugh, they don't laugh. You don't have excuses. And a lot of people say, oh, the audience was bad. Well, then you have to adapt to the audience. Yeah, you have to adapt to the audience. And so it gives you this feeling of, well, to say it in a more bad way, you could say crowd pleasing. Mm-hmm. But it's also always being aware of what do they want, what do they like. Yeah. And at the same time, in these physics studies, there were so many wonderful theories that I thought, why doesn't everybody know this? Mm-hmm. Relativity is a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. Quantum mechanics is miraculous. Mm-hmm. And I could see that most of the explanations that I could find were either too superficial, mm-hmm. like just on the surface metaphors that didn't really explain how it worked, or they were quite technical. Mm-hmm. And I had the feeling that there was a middle layer missing there of the people who really want to know, like one layer deeper than just the surface, but didn't have the time or didn't want to really delve into the technological publications. Mm-hmm. And that's how I started explaining science. I thought...
How was the first time you did that?
Well, that was in the last show, so one mm-hmm. of our late night shows on Belgian television mm-hmm. For a broad audience, and I started explaining physics.
Was that the first time? You didn't do tryouts or anything before that?
No.
So you just went for...
Thrown in the deep, yeah. And that was nice because people really want to know. Mm-hmm. People really like to know how things work, but they also... There's a reflex that many people in the broad audience have to think beforehand, I'm not going to understand it, mm-hmm. or, I'm too stupid for this, is going to be too technical. Yeah. And they start using it as an excuse before you start. I'm really interested, but I don't like the mathematics and everything. And they also, when you're explaining something and it becomes too technical, they're very quick to switch their brain off and go, that's not for me. Yeah. So you have to find, and I think that's kind of the stand-up comedy training that I had to feel where the audience was still with me and when I had lost them.
Yeah. But then if you go to So you have this, like, it's not just scientific, it's some of the most complex topics.
Yeah, they're the most interesting ones.
I agree. But at the same time, how do you, like, you've done now your AI show, you've done the DNA show.
Yeah.
Is that a long process of then, oh, this is too technical, this is not too technical, or is your, I'm assuming your experience is also there, okay, this will work, this will not work? How do you do that?
It's part experience. You try to see the interesting bits, and you try to see the spectacular bits, but then it's a lot of tryouts, and that is something typical for stand-up comedy. A comedian will do easily 50 tryouts before they.
That's a lot.
Yeah, before they bring a show to the official premiere, because as a comedian, you can try to. You can try to understand beforehand what will work and what will not work. You're always surprised by the audience.
Yeah.
There's a few jokes in my show now, and this happens every time for every comedian. There's a few jokes that you have written down and you think, this is my killer joke, and it kind of falls flat. And there's a few jokes that you just write in as a go-between, like from this part to this part, I will say that. And then suddenly it works really well, and you can only find out in the tryouts.
Yeah.
And then also, so for me, the tryouts are not just about the jokes; they're also about what level of technical explanation.
Yeah. How deep should or
Yeah.
Yeah.
And during the tryouts, I always try to go one layer deeper than I expect them to like.
Yeah.
Because most of
It's
the
easier
times,
to come back than to go deeper.
Yeah, and quite often there's no way back. Once you simplify, it's very difficult to say, oh, but the next tryout I will be a bit more technical. So both for DNA and for the AI show, I went a bit deeper. Like I really tried to put the mathematics of back propagation in the show.
That's actually a discussion with Laurent. You know Laurent as well. He's like, back propagation. It's why does he explain it and it's not entirely correct?
No,
I'm like,
of course not.
I get it, but I am assuming it's just because he wants the intuition to be in there.
Yeah.
That people feel it, but they don't need to understand the mechanics per se or something like that.
Well, the fact that in my show and in my book I get to explain very, very simplified, a neural network is a network of nodes with connections that can become stronger or weaker during the training process. That's kind of what I can do.
That's the edge.
And in my book and in the links that I give people after the show, there's a link to 3 Blue 1 Brown, the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm not. I know the name, but I'm not familiar with it.
It's a brilliant YouTube channel because so you have this surface explanation, and then you have the technical publication, and I try to go one layer deeper, and 3 Blue 1 Brown kind of
fills that other gap. Yeah,
covers the even deeper explanation in a very accessible way because of the graphics that he uses. And he has a series about neural networks that I think is very accessible with everyone open to, well, a bit of mathematics, but brilliantly explained. I'm at this moment I'm looking at his series on attention, so on transformers and large language models, and the level of depth that is in these videos about the architecture of a large language model, for me is surprising. But I cannot do it in my shows.
You would lose the crowd.
Of course, I attract a broad audience. There's one bit where I actually use some mathematics on a one-layer perceptron, like really simple thing. With no sigmoid functions or anything, just very, very simple. And even then, I warn the audience, like, I've
seen the show.
If you go stand by, don't worry, I'll be back in 5 minutes with general explanation. But I really want to do this, and that's what I do during the tryouts. I kind of try to feel like, where do I lose the audience? And that was the tipping point. Yeah.
But so, and does that also mean, so your tryouts, then you have like a version which is, of which you're confident this works?
Yeah.
But I'm assuming, how long have you been doing the AI show now?
2 years now.
The first one and the last one is probably not the same.
The week I premiered
Mm-hmm.
was when ChatGPT was released.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay, that I didn't know.
Yeah. It was the same week.
You were scared?
No, because I knew.
Actually, the timing was perfect in the sense of...
In the sense of promotion,
Yeah.
it was amazing because the newspapers were full of AI. People had so many
And
questions.
then you were there, I have a show.
That's kind of what happened. So I was very lucky with the timing. Maybe one small downside is that before ChatGPT was released, you could use I think it was GPT-3 at the time or 3.5. You could use it on the OpenAI website on the Playground platform.
Yeah.
But it was not a consumer product yet. So very, very few people knew how this worked. And to show an audience an autocomplete system.
Yeah.
To show an audience.
When you started involving Thomas Winters?
Also, yeah.
Yeah.
Thomas helped me a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But to show an audience, because my tryouts are in libraries and they're not in theaters yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the looks on the faces, especially of the technical people, who saw software complete texts in a very human-like way, and people were blown away. The same happened with generative AI when it produced images. When I was doing tryouts, very, very few people knew about DALL-E and Midjourney and things like that. So people were blown away. And now, of course, many people know that this, and maybe that is something that surprised me a lot. The speed at which we started taking it for granted. Like, of course, software can write a poem. It amazes me.
In your show 2 years ago everybody was mind blown?
Yeah.
And now people are still learning, but the mind blown is gone then?
There's
Or
still,
you change it so you can still blow their minds, or...
it depends. There's a big chunk of the audience now who have been playing with ChatGPT themselves, and there's also quite a few people who are playing around with image generating generative AI. But there's also the people who have read in the newspaper that you can generate images with AI, but I really wanted to do live demos. So I asked the audience for suggestions to generate an image, and then I do it on the spot. And the fact that this image appears within seconds is still something that amazes a lot. So that's what I hear a lot after the show. Like, I didn't know it was so fast. But at this moment, I think most of the people come to my show or read the book because they hear a lot about AI. They see they even use ChatGPT. And many people wonder, but what is
it now?
What's under the hood?
Yeah.
We can easily understand hard-coded software. Like when this input comes in, you do this with it, and then you turn it. If this, then that. Like the rules. But this text, many people think there's hard-coded software behind it, and so explaining a neural network is for me the core of my science communication on AI, because that's the level that most people don't get to in their daily lives, but explains a lot and brings 5 million new questions, of course.
Yeah, but it's crazy how I remember that you said I'm not an AI expert.
No.
But I'm what was it? The New Year's reception of the neighborhood coming together, and then we just moved in there since October. And I met a few people, so new neighbors, and I was talking, and they asked, like, what are you doing? What do you do? And I was, AI, I don't understand. But I've seen Lieven's show, and at least 5 people told me that, and that's like, they know what AI is because of that show. So like I said, you're not an AI expert, but the moment that people start, the general public, like, they learn AI because of they've seen your show, maybe more of an expert than a lot of other people say.
I'm a science communications expert, I would say. I'm not an AI expert.
Okay, fair point.
Yeah.
Now, so it moved very fast. You had those 2 years. You've experienced that change. You've adapted your show to a certain extent. what I'm seeing or thinking is that AI is moving extremely fast. You're explaining how text is being generated, how images are being generated. I'm sure you've heard about the agentic AI, the taking over processes and actually full workflows of people. Does that mean that, because that concept is even, in my opinion, more bigger than just generating text?
Yeah.
Does that mean, how do you think about that then? Do you now start, okay, I need to understand this, and how do you, what does that mean for you?
I'm constantly in this mode of I need to understand more of this. So
is that also what drives you in the job, like the
absolutely.
mental enrichment continuously?
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm very curious, and I am not satisfied by a superficial explanation. I want to know how it works.
Yeah.
I think it comes with the physics study. It's the general question of physics, but how does it work? Like one layer deeper. So I always want to know myself. I then have the tendency to explain this to other people. But if you want to explain something in an accessible way, you have to understand it yourself a few layers deeper.
Yeah.
And so even before I did science communication, I was always looking for explanation, like how I think I would have been my own audience if I was not doing this. And when it comes to AI, it's a lot of fun because it moves so fast, and the fact that there's also these open questions, like the simple difference between large language models are just next word generators that produce very clever looking text, or large language models are starting to conceptualize, and there's a lot going on in the neural network that we don't even understand, but that is far ahead of just next word prediction.
It starts to understand things. It starts to reason now even.
Yeah, but there's two interpretations there. Some people say through language it copies the structure and the patterns of reasoning that it has seen in the training data, but it doesn't reason itself. And others say by letting this network adapt itself based on text in which people are reasoning, it started to learn itself to reason. And nobody can say who's right, because...
Yeah, actually I should have, next time, if we ever do this again, I should invite Laurent with this, because he actually has a theory where there is an adaptation that to the transformer network that would allow it to learn better. And there's even the famous Ilya Sutskever, you probably... he actually, I've just learned it from Laurent as well, had a quote like, the network wants to learn, but there's things in the way to really let it learn. It's like it's being forced in a certain pattern to learn, and then others, people argue it's just learning to mimic.
Yeah.
But he claims, and Laurent as well, that there's a path where releasing it to really start understanding it is what we need, and it's also possible.
Well, again, when you ask Hinton, he will agree, and he even says, I see very basic levels of consciousness in neural networks. He invented the thing, so okay. But when you ask Jan LeCun or Andrew Ng, they will disagree. And they will say it's very clever mathematics. And so the founders of this field do not agree on how deep the understanding is of the neural network.
Do you know the Wikipedia page P Doom?
No.
So P Doom, it's something I've learned recently as well. P as of chance.
Yeah.
Doom.
Okay.
And basically you have all the... yeah.
That's funny.
I knew you were going to like that. So there's all the big names you just mentioned and more are in there, and they tell what's the chance of doom because of AI. Yeah. And actually there's a very high correlation between what you're saying, the people who think there's already like emergent conscious behavior, and it's just a mathematical formula. Jan LeCun is basically saying it's mathematical formula association. It's never going to be clever. Yeah. But then Geoffrey Hinton is indeed saying, okay, this is already like starting to be human, and that P-Doom is very correlated. So
of course,
maybe something for you to check in. Quite interesting.
I certainly will. But what also surprised me in the past 2 years is how large language models are kind of overshadowing all the rest of AI. I started the show by explaining people this is new software that is good at pattern recognition, and so in industry and in agriculture we can automate a lot of stuff that was impossible to automate with hard-coded software. That was kind of my basic story. And then I said, oh, there's this wonderful thing, it can also do language. But when you ask people in the street about AI, they immediately assume you're talking about large language models. Yeah, that kind of taking over. Then especially when they become agentic, then it will be even more like the.
And how do you see that? Is it then, because what I'm then wondering, is it, so you're doing this, you're good at it, you're having fun, but do you see it as a mission somehow as well? To rephrase that question, I see a lot of people are unknown about what's going to happen.
True.
I don't think that the majority of people barely understand of what's going to happen in the next 2 to 5 years because of automation of cognitive processes, to keep it conceptually. I also think that's a big risk. And I also think because of the show for AI, that's already a huge, not just the fact that it's funny and interesting, but contribution to society, that people learn about AI. But there's now the next new wave. How do you feel about that?
It's the missionary part. Is, for me, it's a nice to have. Maybe I should say it's a very nice to have, but it was never my drive.
Okay.
What we often say in our collective in Nerdland, like the science communicators, what we often say is that we like to talk about science like in a football program they talk about football. These are people who are passionate about this game, and they don't just informatively tell people what happened, but in a good football show, they will also talk about what do I think of it?
Yeah.
What do I think about this action? Was this player at the right position? So there's a lot of how does it feel to watch this? And for us, we talk about science in the same way. We talk about a landing rocket of SpaceX. We are amazed by the technology behind it, but we will also say that we teared up when we saw the first 2 boosters land simultaneously. And so that's our basic drive. We love this topic. We want to share it with other people. The fact that many people come to us afterwards and say, like, it inspired my kids. I understand some technological things better now. I found a new interest in science. That's a very nice thing to hear, a very nice thing to have, because, of course, I would think that most people sometimes ponder about their contribution to society. When you're a baker, then your contribution to society is pretty obvious. You have taken raw ingredients, you have turned them into bread. People had bread in the morning. It's easy. When you're an entertainer, it's difficult sometimes. You say, like, okay, I gave people a nice evening, but I haven't built a house. I haven't made the bread, so it's more difficult. So the fact that also many companies tell us, like, we are so in need of technical profiles, and you're helping, that I think that's really nice to hear. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. So that also does that also mean that you see the purely informative part, because that's basically what you're saying. That's not per se our role, the informative part. Do you see that more as a let's say the standard media's role, or where do you find that role? Because I find that difficult in the sense that it's a difficult topic, but it's crucial that people know it.
Yeah.
Where do you see that?
Yeah, well, now I think because my mind is so trained on the entertainment side that it's difficult to think about the educational side. Like apart from the fact that I think it is really nice to learn about these things, people should know, and how do we let them know? I have no idea. I think I'm lucky to be at the entertainment side, and I'm convinced that many people really want to know how it works, but they're also a bit scared by the technical details. So you need a spoonful of sugar, and the comedy side is my spoonful of sugar, which I really like. And probably the fact that it works is because it's not a construction. It's not that I woke up in the morning, I thought, people need to know about AI. How do I sugarcoat it so they like it? That's not how it worked for me.
It started from your own...
Yeah. It started from my own interest, and the fact that I will always add comedy to my explanation. So that's kind of how it worked. And also that's I think, sometimes politicians think about how do we get more interest in science in our society, and it's very difficult to reach an audience when you come from this approach.
Yeah,
you will always reach the audience that you already had, and so I think we're quite lucky to find this.
Can I translate it a bit as the fact you're working on your passion, but your passion is contagious, which makes the other part nice to have, extremely nice to have, but hacking for the other part or focusing on the other part would not have the same effect.
No, and you often see this in government programs, because often they will say we need to educate the kids about science.
Yeah,
and then they will start their own program or festival or school event. And they will have a big banner that says, "Science is fun." And then I think, if you have to put that up in huge letters, then
there's something off.
Of course, and especially teenagers will start being suspicious.
Yeah.
Like, why are you trying to lure us in this direction? And they say science is fun, and there will be somebody in a white coat on the picture holding a pink liquid that is bubbling and smoke comes out, and every chemist thinks like, why did you put dry ice in colored water? That's not really useful. And so as a kid I was always suspicious of I don't know what the English word is for the rattenvanger van Hamelen. It's
I don't know.
Yeah,
I know what you mean, but
it's this tale where somebody is playing the flute and can lure all the rats out of the city, but then the city doesn't want to pay him for his service, so he lures all the children out. And often these government programs to promote science feel like do follow us kids, do let's go to the science part. And that this approach doesn't work when you enter it from that side, and it will always be the same. They will invite some scientists to do their explanation. At this moment, I think scientists have become a lot better at explaining their topics than 20 years ago. But every now and then, one of them will be kind of dry and too technical, because they will use the same talk they use at corporate events, and then they will put a rapper in between, or someone from a popular TV show who will do something entertaining, and then
they ask you.
And then they ask a scientist again, and it feels so constructed.
Yeah, it's not coming from a passion point of view. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. Imagine that football was something magically important for economy, and most people didn't like it.
I have stock analysts doing the football reviews.
Yeah, and then you would have a very technical explanation of a football game that most of the audience don't understand, and then you would have a famous actress sing a song, so just to keep them there, and then they would be more. That's kind of how it feels with these science events.
Yeah, passion is contagious as well.
Yeah.
So that means, if I understand it well, you're interested, so you'll dive into it, and sooner or later, your final show might end up in a new show. Might.
Well, the show is evolving a lot. I think 1/3 of the show is new compared to the first time
So more than 30% is completely
I think so.
changed. That's quite a lot on 2 years, I would say. Was that before the same? Maybe because I'm saying that's quite a lot.
No.
If you had a show, you would do 2 years almost the same?
The DNA show stayed quite the same. It varied. Well, it evolved a bit, but nothing like
More
like
in
the-
terms of fine-tuning than...
Yeah, and sometimes there was news. There was news in gen technology every now and then. But the AI show, the first the first month I played it, so January 23. A big part about large language models was making it fail and hallucinate and showing people like it don't
stupid.
trust it.
Yeah.
Don't trust it. It will hallucinate. I asked a biography of myself, and it made up book titles, and it made up the place I was born. It made up
But
my
you were a
date of
comedian,
birth.
that was correct.
It didn't always say I was a comedian. It said I studied engineering in Leuven instead of physics in Ghent. So hallucinating all over the place, which was quite funny. But it doesn't do this anymore
No.
because it will check online and everything. And so then the quite a recent demo that I do is making it write a sonnet, which if you prompt it right, does amazingly well in English, I must say. It doesn't do it well in Dutch. That was completely impossible when I premiered. Like January 23, you could not ask GPT 3.5, write me a sonnet about this and expect something nice to come out. So especially the large language models bit evolved a lot. The basic explanation of what is a neural network and why does it do what it does, that kind of stays the same and will probably stay the same for the next years.
Yeah. That's for what you're working on in terms of content, but in the way you work as a job, we've done a few things like on Maskatron, like helping to prepare jokes. How do you see your job being impacted by it? Like on Maskatron, that's not necessarily your job. It's more a tool to help people understand and see what it is and make some fun, have some fun. Or
recognize the voices of the masked singers was just something that in the level of knowledge that I got through my research, kind of really connected to me as this seems like
something that could work.
This seems like a good job for an AI system.
Yeah.
This is pattern recognition. And the fact that AI systems started being really good at imitating voices kind of gives you the hint that it's got the right embedding to link the tone of a voice to this person. So that was kind of a hunch for me, like this is good pattern recognition. And it is in a way also for my job, this had everything. The Masked Singer is a very popular program. People are always very curious about everybody's looking for who is the singer. People are also curious about AI. And in fact, building an AI that can recognize these voices gives you an opportunity to give people a better understanding of what AI can and cannot do. Especially because of large language models, they were so convincing that people got a far too broad view of what was going on.
Yeah, they didn't know the limitations anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I had people come to me and say, like, with these AI systems, why don't we just give all the text of one of our famous cold cases in Belgium, the Bende van Nijvel.
Yeah.
So somebody said to me, why don't we just put all this text in ChatGPT and it will tell us who did it? And then, of course, you think, but that's not how it works, because it looks for patterns in everything that people have written down, but it cannot come up with new stuff that is not in there. And so that's not how it works. But recognizing a voice...
But it might actually work if you would have all other cases where you can say, this is what we found out, and then see, probably, but let's not...
I think Bende van Nijvel is so unique in its form that there's not too
Another
many
pattern to figure out. Yeah.
not too many patterns from other files that you can use in solving it. Yeah, but another thing about large language models is that people are always amazed how bad it is at mathematics.
Was.
Yeah, true. Because now they've programmed in it that mathematical questions should not be solved by neural networks. That's not how it works. And so when you ask it mathematical questions, it will solve them in language. When you say how much is 7 plus 8, there will be no binary representation of 7 and binary representation of 8 that are counted together mathematically. It will just look in all the language patterns, 7 and 8 usually leads to 15. That's what it does. And so when you ask it very complicated formulas, it's almost always wrong.
They also found another way now, which is the tool use part, where you can say, okay, as a language system, you won't figure it out, but you can use a calculator.
Yeah. So again, the language system leading itself to this is something I should not do with a neural network, but with calculation is very clever, and is one of these things that made a huge step forward in the past months.
And so we have Mascatron, which was a good case for you for promotion basically,
Also,
and for but then you have so that helped there, but that's very trending. That's something. It's interesting, but next year or in 2 years, the spark is gone because people will understand it's possible. It will not be as interesting anymore. But the content of your job, like writing jokes or even doing tryouts, because you can reverse it. Like I have these jokes, what people find is funny, because in product development they start doing that.
Of course,
they start using personas generated by ChatGPT to verify new product ideas.
Yeah.
Are those things you are experimenting with, and you see, or broader in media? How do you?
I feel now that I should experiment more, and actually now that you phrase it like that, I think my next show I could run a transcript through a large language model and ask it for feedback. I will still be skeptical and decide for myself what feedback I will use or not, but chances are that some really good feedback comes out of this. I translated my book to English with GPT-4, which it's not plug and play. It's something that I always warn people for. Large language models can do amazing things, but you are the supervisor. It's a very hardworking intern that makes unexpectedly stupid mistakes. And if you're not there to spot the mistake, it will end up in your product. And so I translated the entire book with GPT-4 and I read it myself. And most of it was amazingly well translated. And then let's say around 10 completely stupid mistakes.
Like 10 on how many words or pages?
On 300 pages. But I mean mistakes that change the meaning of the sentence completely.
Not just a grammatical error, but really,
Like an expression like, I wouldn't be surprised, was changed to, I'd be very surprised.
Okay.
Think like really switching the meaning. And so that, for me, that was an interesting case because GPT-4 was a very useful tool there to make this first transcript. And it would have been disastrous had I not checked and corrected it. And
so it made you go a lot faster?
Absolutely, yeah.
But you still needed to
do
the quality control.
So it's the Centaur unit that they use in chess, that collaboration between a human and an AI system is the most powerful. It's more powerful than the human and is more powerful than the AI on its own. And I think for my next show, I could easily feed it a transcript, maybe prompt some system prompt in there and say, look at this show in this way. In editing, it is used now, editing stories, asking it for feedback on the development of a story. And it will be wrong sometimes, but the times that it is right and you can spot that it is right, it is really useful, yeah.
So, and in terms of because 11 Labs now started the integration with Spotify, so you can have audiobooks immediately on Spotify. Have you tested? You have tested generating podcasts.
Yeah.
What was your evaluation? Do you see it as a useful tool, or?
Well, looking at Google Notebook, I was blown away the first time it generated a podcast based on a PDF that I just fed it. Also, something really nice, I think, is that the time to generate the podcast is shorter than the length of the podcast. So,
the generation of it. Yeah.
It will produce 15 minutes of audio.
So you need
in 5
less
minutes.
time investment to get more output.
Yeah, but a podcast, a conversation feels so real time for us. And the fact that this version of real time is a lot faster in the silicon is, I think, a really nice thing, to kind of counterintuitive thing to play with.
It feeds the simulation thought.
Yeah. The calculation is not bound by our earthly time. It can do it a lot faster. Producing 15 minutes of audio in just 5 minutes of calculation, I like that. But of course, when you produce more and more of these notebook podcasts, you start feeling the pattern, and it's like, today we have an amazing topic for you. Let's dive into the world of plants. Plants are so fascinating, right? And then you have always this same kind of...
Yeah.
And that's what you have with a lot of large language models. If you don't system prompt them, it will become this same...
Superficially, they feel the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's improving for ChatGPT. But in the beginning, when we had motivational letters or Vex, you felt, or blog posts,
of course,
this is ChatGPT. There was like a superficiality to it, which made you, they've used ChatGPT. Yeah.
You can use ChatGPT. I don't think it's a problem. If you feed it the content, if you tell it what to talk about, it will produce a text. The fact that more and more people start recognizing this typical style is a down point. I think that's the same with AI-generated images. You start recognizing them. It's this typical skin glow that you see again and again.
Pretty.
But that's the thing. And of course, when you start recognizing it, it becomes a thing that you feel like, oh, again. And it's the same with the writing style of ChatGPT. But giving it a good system prompt can turn this around. If you say make it a bit more lighthearted or make it breezy, and then you can get better. And especially when you do some editing yourself, then it's even best.
And so when it generated jokes, did people find it funny?
We generated jokes with ChatGPT together with Thomas Winters, so with a PhD student on language models who has been studying this for 10 years, I think. And he knows how to prompt. So what he did is he asked himself the question, how does a comedian come to a joke? And we used very well-known improv formats, like give me...
It's templates or something then, or...
Well, like improv games are like, give me the worst possible commercial slogan for, and then you ask the audience, give us suggestions. And so Thomas kind of analyzed, how does a comedian come to a very bad commercial slogan? First, he will think about all the cliches of this topic. Then he will think about all the things that people dislike about this topic. And then they will usually put two together and make a very cliche commercial slogan out of it. Now, if you ask ChatGPT just make the worst possible commercial slogan, it's mostly really bad. Well, things that look like a joke but aren't a joke.
Yeah.
It copies the pattern of the grammatical pattern of a joke.
It's like someone trying to tell a joke, but it's not funny.
Well, yeah, you could say like the 5-year-old toddler has heard a lot of knock-knock jokes, doesn't understand the clue, but understands the structure, and that's done.
Yeah, good comparison.
Does something similar. Knock knock, who's there? I'm a cow. Cow who? Boo. There's no joke there, but the structure is right. And so that's what ChatGPT did. And so what Thomas did is system prompted, like when you're asked to make the worst possible commercial slogan about this, first give me some cliches about this topic, then give me some things that people dislike about this topic, and then combine two of these to a very commercial line. And then it's hit and miss.
Okay, so there are very good ones, but...
Yeah.
And is there, no pun intended, but a pattern in it?
I don't remember because Thomas was behind the screen. So we were on stage and we did our own lines. So we did our own improvised lines.
It was an actual competition.
Yeah, so there was an audience. The audience was not aware that we were using AI. We did our own improv lines based on this question. And then we also had a screen so we could read the AI lines. But Thomas selected like the good ones.
Yeah.
So he left out the rubbish ones, and then he selected the good ones, sent them to us. And then the audience afterwards could vote on which jokes they liked most without them being aware that they were voting on human and AI jokes. And so when you have the two bell curves that came out, they were very overlapping, but the human jokes were rated a bit better than the AI joke.
When was that?
That was a year ago.
I would be really interested to know how if it changed or not.
Let's do it again.
It would be very interesting to see
that. Good. I'll ask Thomas.
Wouldn't you be surprised to know there's a year gone by? It's not that long, but a lot has happened.
That's true. Yeah.
How would that? Because if you then come to the conclusion we've moved further together, that's I would find that very interesting.
Well, something else is that this entire reasoning part is now going on behind the screen, like most of the
simply there.
Yeah, so the AI systems will do their own reasoning now. DeepSeek even shows you what it does. So I think Thomas would be really interested to do this. Also, what surprised us most was that the best rated joke of that evening was an AI joke.
It was an AI joke. Okay.
It was give me a slogan on. So all the topics came from other topical shows that they did in that TV show, and I think the question was, give me a slogan on sex between elderly people, was kind of the thing. And it was the joke that the AI came up with was, how do I mess up both my hip and my inheritance? And so you can see what happened. So the system asked.
The strange thing is, it makes you also uncomfortable to laugh at it.
Yeah, I know. But so the system asked, associate things with people on a higher age. Physical things like small pains, things are a bit more difficult. You think about your inheritance. People around you start dying. It made this list, and then it made a list on sex and the things that go around there. And it said, it can be used to produce children, and then it probably linked inheritance and children. So you can actually see how it came to the joke.
Yeah. I was once told by someone who does keynotes, and he said, if you want to attract the attention of people, do something with sex, and you'll have the whole.
Of course, that's our lizard brain that kicks in. It's true. Yeah.
So AI figured that out.
Maybe, or Thomas did by selecting the right one.
Yeah. Cool. So. It would be cool to see that test again. Now, I'm actually not sure if you've seen those things, but you've been to the US not so long ago.
Yeah.
Have you experienced there anything around AI or this topic? And did you experience a difference?
It was a space trip.
Pure space.
It was all about Kennedy Space Center and rockets and everything. So not much AI.
If I saw it well, you saw the Falcon 9 passing by.
Oh, it was amazing. First day we were there, we saw the launch of the Falcon 9. It landed on a drone ship in the ocean, and then the drone ship takes it back to the port. And then 3 days later, I think, we were in a traffic jam. And the reason was that the Falcon 9 was crossing the road on a huge truck.
It's the first traffic jam you didn't mind.
Oh, no, I absolutely didn't mind, no.
In your job, from what I'm hearing, you are experimenting with it. You're interested in it, but it's not like you have the impression today it's really a very important tool for me, or it will challenge my profession.
At this point, at this point in time, I think very few comedians use AI in any way. Probably because we really like crafting our own jokes. Like most comedians don't really like other people writing jokes for them. You're most proud when you scored the goal yourself. It could change fast. Like if you ask an AI system to write jokes like we did in that experiment, it could change fast. And now that you mention it, maybe I should experiment with it a bit more myself, because every time I do a show, I tell people every week you should Google the name of the profession area that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in education, every week you should Google education and AI and see what comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I should do the same thing and start experimenting with comedy and large language models. Yeah.
And how do you see it in? So you're in comedy, but you have the media landscape broader.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you talk with other, media personalities which are not necessarily in comedy.
Yeah.
Do they experience it differently? Because we had the whole strike thing in the US.
Yeah.
In Belgium, I don't think we've really felt that.
No. We don't have this guild of scenario writers in Belgium. Many people in Belgium will write, produce, play, and even direct their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few people who only do the scenario and then give it away. Also, I think the conclusion of the strike in America was quite interesting, being that the movie producers were not allowed to use AI to write scenarios for them, but the people who write scenarios are allowed to use AI as a tool. Think, oh, that is interesting. And writing a scenario is hard work, and you will hit walls all the time. It's a very frustrating thing to do. It will be easy in the beginning, and then you will be stuck, and it's frustrating. And so I think everyone writing a scenario in the frustrating part will have tried ChatGPT. And many of them have tried it in the wrong way, have not prompted it right. So it came up with
It's a bit like Googling
stuff.
in the beginning. You need to be able to
Yeah.
use it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people have asked ChatGPT, write 5 funny jokes about cats, and useless stuff came out. And then after a while, I hope that some of them started thinking like, okay, I have to give it a description of the people who are there. Like, this is the mother, and she's very loving, but she's also worried, and this is the daughter, and she's a teenager. She wants to break free, and so she pushes the mother away, and if you give it that
Context, yeah, you need to give it context.
and then a situation, like, okay, the cat has thrown up, and this person and this person are arguing about who has to clean it, then it will give you suggestions. And once again, it's a brainstorm partner. It's a brainstorm partner, and it will give you bad ideas and good ideas, and you are the person who picks out the good ideas and gets inspired, and then start doing your own human writing.
So in the media field, you haven't felt like a worry about
No.
like because we helped make a clone out of Dina and Andy.
Oh, yeah. The hosts of the show.
Yeah. And I remember when we were talking, we're like, shall we do it? Shall we not do it? And then I wonder, like, are they afraid of it or not? Because I sometimes also have the impression that the other people are more afraid than the actual. Like, we sometimes think, we should be careful because people will not like it. But so in media in Belgium, that's not what you felt.
No, not yet. Also because don't underestimate that an audience likes real people.
Yeah, but I'm not worried. I don't believe that people should be worried.
Yeah.
I think Spotify is a great example of where the evolution is that people like to go more to concerts. That's
True.
what it means for me. Okay, music is easier to get to, but people still want to see that specific person on stage and pay a gazillion euros for it, and more than once, just because it's a real experience.
That's an example.
So I don't think that will change.
That's the exact example that I give many people who think like, oh, but we're only going to see AI artists. Like, I can, on YouTube, I can watch from my home on a huge screen in wonderful resolution. I can watch some of the best concerts that were ever given for free. And still, I will buy a ticket to see my local band.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the flesh. So that's something that I think, and the same with actors. Maybe we reached a level where you can prompt video generation and make a wonderful movie out of it. And I think there will be a market for it. But still, we will want to see the movies with our real human favorite actors.
Yeah. I do think that actors, if you extrapolate, might go to a point where theater and seeing them in real life will also be another, like, going up, because it's the being together, watching someone, the real experience, I think, will gain back in value.
That is a possibility. The relation between theater and television is, for me personally, a very interesting one, because when it comes to accessible storytelling, like being drawn into a story and knowing the characters and what are they doing, I think television kind of took over from theater. There's very little of this basic storytelling theater anymore. Almost, especially in Belgium, almost all our theater is experimental to a certain level. Yeah. And TV series still do this. They draw you in, and this is what is happening. And so, in that case, I think television really took over from theater and made theater more experimental, because the storytelling was consumed at home on the screen. And so the question, if it's going to move back, if we're going to go back to seeing real storytelling theater, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, theater or being able to see someone in real life. I do think that people, they pay premium, they that's what they want.
Look at events and festivals in the past 20 years have boomed.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember a lot of small music festivals 20 years ago that are huge now, because we like to go there, see real things, experience stuff.
And there's constantly new festivals even popping up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe as a final question, something out of the media context. You've been into science for quite some time. You've been very interested. You have some kids.
Yeah.
How do you think about your kids? Do you advise them to look into it? Do you leave them? That's something, because I have some kids of myself as well. I'm already my oldest using ChatGPT as even sometimes a conversation partner, because I want him to learn. And he also likes it a lot, actually, because he's like, what is this tree? If we go walking, and he takes my phone and he's and then he starts to learn, because he's just interested and he can find all of this information.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? How do you think, or do you think about it?
Before I had kids, I had huge plans, like everyone has. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do such a parent, stuff like that. And you recognize it. And there was a lot in there, like, I'm going to give them the right...
Going to do it all better than everyone else.
Absolutely. And the right size at the right time and everything. Then life catches up, and you see that a lot of parenting is just dealing with the practical stuff. But there's a few things that I do, and that is answering questions. When they're curious for something, I will give them a long answer. Also, teaching them at a young age to search things themselves, to be critical and to Google things. When it comes to their specific interest, my eldest, so my daughter, she's not really into hard sciences like physics and mathematics. And I always thought like, oh, I really want this mathematical physics children. And then you have kids and they have their own interests and you don't care anymore. I don't mind. She really doesn't like math and physics. She's really into psychology and art and storytelling and human sciences. And that's wonderful to see her explore that part. And then my son is a bit more into mathematics. And then he could choose between hard sciences or economics. And he chose economics. Ow. The most earthly of all sciences. But once again, you think he likes it. He's interested. Let him do it. And so for me, it was more feeding them when they ask a question, give a long answer, teaching them how to look things up. Now they find their own podcasts that they're interested in, and I love it.
But so you've taught them to learn, you've taught them be curious and keep on learning, basically.
Yeah. That's when you give someone a fish, they will eat for a day. When you teach them how to fish, they will only eat fish. When you teach them how to Google, they can do everything they want.
And then one other thing, maybe just for something that I want to add, because I've been thinking about it as well. And I think, basically that's what you're saying as well. I think for kids, it's helping them to learn and also knowing what they really like.
Yeah.
Because I think everything else comes from that, because the world is a world of, and I believe we're going even more to it, a world of abundance. You can, there's enough opportunities, there's enough things to do, as long as you like what you're doing and you're passionate about it, the rest will follow. Yeah,
that's, I really feel like it too. Maybe I should add, this is true for the kids that have a stable platform, in the sense of family, mental health, because of course there's children who have there's young kids who have other struggles before they get to following their interest. But when you get there, when you're a middle class Sunday child like I am, and you have this platform, then it is absolutely true. Yeah, it's the world is our oyster, and
it's
we can explore it.
A good and important nuance to it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
And on that one, I think we can wrap up. Thank you, Lieven. It was very interesting.
Pleasure was mine.